The interesting problem with bark is it is generally kind of uniform. I just grabbed a bark, so it's harder to pull out lights and darks. As you can see, the values between the dark areas and the dark parts of the bark are very similar. So what I have a tendency to like to do on this one is use a different method. First, I'll desaturate it. In desaturation, just hide these, so I'll go through the whole process. So once it's desaturated, I'm going to look at, okay, does this information carry my lights and darks any further? It's like in this particular case, no. So I want to bring up some of these light areas here and push back some of these dark areas. Now I can do that in multiple ways, but the first thing I'm going to do with this one is I can use the image adjustments of shadow and highlights and go the opposite way of normal and push the shadows even down further. Otherwise it flattens it out even more. Try and push my highlights up. Now this is kind of starting to make a little more separation between the two, but it's still not quite enough. So after that I can do the HDR toning, in which, remember, because the HDR toning will break, will flatten everything, I'm just going to take this whole thing and duplicate it before doing it. Now my original file is not messed up. So with this, I can pull my shadows and highlights as I wish. Pull down my exposure, push it up actually. So you can see where I'm starting to get a kind of a black and white version of this, kind of a strengthened version. Now, the only problem with a lot of this information is it's just way too much. I mean, look at that. I can just as easily do this with a layers level, which can be found right here. And kind of bring in my whites, kind of bring in my blacks. Oh, let's leave the blacks. But I can start getting some of the information that way. As you can see they're very similar. And that's mostly because this particular method, your values are all messed up and there's no as clean distinction as the other system with bricks. So I have this. Now, once I'm here, I'm just going to actually commit this. Sorry. Commit those two together, so I have a lighter and darker. Now, I can overlay this top layer down, and let's say we're going to, if I do an overlay, it'll make the darks darker and the lights lighter. It's multiplying them, so to speak, as you can see. So I'm carrying some of the grays, a lot of the blacks. It's only at a 60% opacity now. Now what I can do with that is I'm going to duplicate these, merge them, so I kind of get the equivalent of the new image. Now, this still doesn't really give us any clean information because of all of the artifacting and things like that. So it needs to be smoothed out for a normal map. In this particular case, we can use a blur. I like smart blurs. Smart blurs will kind of flatten things out, and you can kind of tweak the settings to see what you like. And the whole point of this right now is I'm actually trying to just get rid of some information. You can see by tweaking these, I'm starting to lose bits of information. The picture itself is starting to flatten out very purposefully. But this is not going to actually get me there because there's still a ton of information. So you can see it's flattened out a little bit more, but it's still not quite what I want. This is going to be a mess to deal with. So I'm going to take this and duplicate or jump this level again. I'm going to do something unusual because what I really want to do is get rid of some of the noise. So I'm going to reduce noise. Now, in reducing noise, bam, look what happens. It starts to smooth out. There's a lot of artifacting in here. You can see right there, all along here, because of the removal of the noise. JPEG artifacting, so to speak. But you can go in here and see how much you can push it and get the information you want. It seems preserving any kind of detail is really not helping much. I don't know what advanced looks like, so let me see. Oh, apparently you can break it down per channel, which is quite powerful, to be honest, but I wouldn't bother with using it. You can play around with the buttons as you want. But as you can see, just doing this, let's let it update. I'm trying to find any setting that'll get rid of any of these artifacting. But okay, so this gives me a soft image, and you can see where this is actually quite useful. It begins to break up some of my information. Now I can take this and do the same to this. So I'm going to basically reduce the noise on this, which had way more of an effect than I anticipated. Yeah, unfortunately, with Bark, there's no incredibly short shortcuts because it's not linear to begin with. So let's see if I can just start reducing some of this. Yeah, I'm testing different layers to see where I'm going to get the best information from. I'm going to try doing the reduce noise on the lowest level, which works pretty well. And then I'm going to try doing a smart blur. There we go. Look at that. This is starting to kind of posterize my image. It's a little extreme, but that's okay, because we actually kind of want it to be a little on the extreme side for the normal map. So I'm going to tweak this to see if I can get a little information back into it, but not a lot. You'll see me creating a lot of layers as I do tweaks because I don't want to destroy my lower layers. Okay, now this is actually somewhat useful. You can start seeing it will be a decently clean normal map as it changes. Now I may have to go in here and paint or smudge or do something to get some of these to blend a little better. I would try not to use a Gaussian blur or anything like that, only because it'll start breaking it apart, and you actually want for Bark to have these kind of striations that go on. So we can take this over the top of something that's our denoised filter. Let's see. There we go. See, it's I reduced the opacity by 50, picking up some of the details from below, but mostly reducing it flat. Now I can take this at this point, and I'll just save it. Bark, okay. And then I don't think I have Crazy Bump on this computer. Being not my work computer or my school computer. Oh, maybe I do have Crazy Bump. Let's see if it works. Now this is not a tiling texture, of course, but it gets the idea. Oh, here we go. It's very, very slow. So let's open from a height map. Open. Okay, so you can see once again it's really kind of molded plastic, which drives me a little insane. So I can start taking, I generally take down my large details, medium details, and then I start to get the brick. Start to get the bark. Not perfect, of course. It has problems all along here. It's a little bit too much of an island, so I would want to go in and fix up areas here, back in the map. Where this is where I'd start really comparing what the actual map looks like to what I'm changing. And then emphasize certain parts of it. You can see where it's really broken here, and these cracks are really small, but it looks funny when it's in Crazy Bump. Now, of course, we can sharpen it, but that's not going to get us enough information. Okay, it's starting to understand some things, so it's starting to understand some of the shapes. I pushed up the shape recognition. It might go well with a color map on top of it, but the problem is I'm seeing some weird edges here. It might be good enough, at least to start. Let me remove some of the shape recognition. But you might, when looking at it, decide to paint in some of this information here to give longer strokes. You might decide that the way it's breaking up the information across here is a little too much, and you don't like little bits coming out here, or the lines are not deep enough or thick enough. So at this point, you can go in, start taking your brush and painting areas that you decide, like, oh, I've decided I don't really care if that goes in. So I'm going to paint some of that out. Wow, my computer's slow right now. And of course, this will work differently on your tiled texture. I hope that helps you some. It's a complete different way of doing things than you were taught in class. Unfortunately, with normal maps and how you get there by painting varies completely on the hue, saturation, color, and value, to be redundant, of the texture itself.